Hey everyone, and welcome to the Building Geniuses podcast, where we talk to geniuses throughout the commercial real estate and building automation industries, asking them how they've gotten where they are, who's walked alongside them, and how they're helping others along the way. This is episode 10 of season 1, and I'm your host, Tim Vogel. On today's episode, we're talking with Omar Tabba of BrainBox AI. Hey Omar, how are you today? Welcome to the Building Geniuses podcast.
Hey Tim, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. I saw quickly kind of a list of the others that preceded me, and I'm like, wow, this is a great show and a great crowd. So looking forward to chatting with you today.
We're very excited, and by the time that we're recording this, we've only released a couple episodes, and the feedback that we've gotten has been really, really good. And I think it's because the format's a little different. It's not quite as salesy or marketing-esque, because really it's all about conversations and making sure that we're talking to people that are influential in the marketplace, particularly in the industries that we find ourselves working in, and that are trying to be really intentional about making a difference or doing things new, and then helping others learn about what those things are. And so with that kind of baseline foundation of what we're trying to do, I very much knew that I wanted Omar to be a part of this, because you guys are doing some pretty interesting things. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about what you're doing now, who you're with, and maybe kind of some of the ways that you're taking some new approaches in the industry.
Sure thing. So like you said, my name is Omar Tabba. I'm the Chief Product Officer at BrainBox AI. We're a Montreal-based company that is a cloud provider of AI-driven building optimization. So essentially, we connect to buildings and we optimize their energy efficiency and thereby reduce their utility costs and greenhouse gas emissions. We're about 160 people, and we're deployed or connected to buildings in over 21 countries, 70 cities, different types of real estate. And it's been a fun ride. I've been here for just under 3 years, started in November 2019.
Now, what would you say kind of your day-to-day is as Chief Product Officer? What do you find yourself, what kinds of work do you find yourself doing a lot?
Oh, sure thing. So there are multiple buckets of responsibility. So first you have the actual product roadmap itself. So what features are we working on? When are they going to be released? How do we sort them in terms of importance to the company? Are they designed to generate more revenue? Are they designed to retain customers? Are they designed to reduce the cost of onboarding a customer, and so on? We also have product marketing. So this is hand in hand with our marketing team, where we figure out what kind of collateral needs to be created, whether it be the website or sales presentations and so on. We also have customer-facing activities. So whenever there's a new feature or a new release, this needs to be communicated to the sales team. They need to be trained, and also clearly to get the reaction of the customer, the voice of the customer, right? So that pulse has to always be present in our life.
So do you find yourself talking a lot to end customers and kind of getting that pulse? What are they looking for? What are the needs, and how your solution can best fit those needs?
Yeah, so we spend quite a bit of time, speaking for my team, talking to customers. So it's probably in the 30 to 40% neighborhood of our time is somehow interfacing with customers in some way. So whether it be on a call with a customer or visiting them in person, like I am now, as you can see, I'm in a hotel room here. So that's also very valuable, that face-to-face. We also go to trade shows. So Tim, you and I crossed paths last at Realcomm in Orlando. So there you get to meet different types of customers and other vendors as well. So yeah, that it's very important in our role to not have kind of a ivory tower syndrome and kind of or echo chamber where we think we know the answer and then we confirm it to ourselves and start developing in a vacuum, right? So absolutely have to stay in touch with the customer.
So you've been with BrainBox for 3 years. Have you been the Chief Product Officer that whole time?
I started out as a VP of Product and Solutions, and then moved up to Chief Product Officer about 1.5 years ago. So similar role, I would say, maybe a slight change in title. Just trying to be precise with the question.
Well, and kind of where I'm going with that question is, BrainBox is focused on applying AI to the data coming out of buildings, and then automatically then pushing out particular set points or whatever it may be. How did you get into AI?
Super interesting question. So I live in Montreal. BrainBox is a Montreal-based company as well. Montreal, if you look into the kind of the AI circles and kind of the academia related to it, you'll find that Montreal is one of the global hubs for AI. It's primarily an ecosystem that was started by a professor at the University of Montreal called Yoshua Bengio, who has been kind of writing and developing and training, master's and PhD student on this topic for many years. And so when you live there, you kind of you hear about it a lot, right? So you can AI this and AI that, and Montreal and AI and ecosystem. So a few years back, I said, you know what? Maybe I should take a look at this AI thing and see what's going on, because quite a few people are talking about it. So I took a course. I took a course online. It's called the Deep Learning Specialization on Coursera. It's given by a really wonderful professor at Stanford. His name is Andrew Ng. He's also a co-founder of Coursera and was the former head of Google Brain. So quite an accomplished fellow. In any case, it's a great specialization. I would recommend it to anyone who's interested in the topic. So you get to actually do a little bit of coding, a little bit of theory, a little bit of everything to kind of wrap your head around what the tools are and how it can be used.
So you mentioned Coursera.
That set of courses was really interesting because it, in my mind, and this, by the way, was before BrainBox. This was in a previous life. It really, in my mind, I remember the moment after I had taken the courses where I'm like, this could really work in our industry being, let's call it building automation broadly and smart buildings broadly. Why? Because we have a lot of data. It's there, right? It's being generated, and we're not using it to the full extent that we could. So it was kind of, that was the spark. I kind of didn't do anything about it at the time, and then BrainBox came knocking a couple of years after that, and kind of the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, interesting. So you had been hearing this term a lot, and so rather than just sort of read a couple articles about it and have a cursory knowledge, you took this Coursera course, did a little deeper dive, better understood it. So mentioning Coursera, I mean, it's an online learning environment, I suppose you could call it, and it's similar to like a MOOC, but is that one of the paid courses, or is it a free online course?
Yeah, you can do both. You can audit the course for free if you want access to the kind of the exercises, and if you want any credentials at the end of the course, then you pay, and I think a reasonable amount, like $60 a month or something like this. And it's a go at your own pace type of setup.
Do you do that a lot?
I'm a big fan of continuous education. Yeah. I'm whether it doesn't have to be Coursera, it could be any format. It could be reading a book, could be talking to somebody that is an expert in a field. It could be formal, etc. So I think one of the revelations in my life has been that you can continue to learn, and you can continue to acquire new skills, and just push yourself in the direction of your interest and see where you end up. And then I think, maybe a good analogy could be kind of like downloading an app onto your phone. You can download an accounting app or a music app, etc. Right? So different apps can be downloaded into our minds, and we decide to use them. Once a month, every day. It really depends on what we want to do.
I really enjoy reading. Typically, it's nonfiction, but I also have gotten into audiobooks recently, which have been great for learning huge amounts of information in a much smaller amount of time, typically while I'm doing something else like mowing the grass or on a plane or in the car. So, it's kind of like redeeming those moments of when I would otherwise be doing nothing up here. And it's been helpful, again, just to learn new things, learn new perspectives, gain a better understanding of a topic or a worldview, whatever it is. But I've never taken an online class. The only college I've had is, through I guess, kind of your more traditional means. But I've always been interested in doing it. So hearing that you've done it is kind of like, I need to, I need to get back into that myself. Do Would you say that there is kind of a culture of learning, whether around you or in BrainBox or in the circles that you frequent?
I would say definitely. So at BrainBox, we have an internal training program, and we encourage our employees, and when we subsidize the costs of the training and the time and so on. So it's definitely a thing. And if you follow some of our folks on LinkedIn, you'll see them post they're just completed this course or that certification. So I think it's a very, very healthy thing, and it's a must-have, right? As we continue to grow, as we continue to evolve, people want to pursue different passions and different career paths. And yeah, I think it's definitely a thing with the people that I surround myself with as well.
So how long? So you've been at BrainBox 3 years. How long have you been in the building automation industry?
So I can tell you the date. It was August 2003 is when I started in this industry. And I started with Distech Controls, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
And what did you do for Distech?
So I had studied civil engineering, in college, and I worked for a large general contractor for a year. And then, it was a remote project, in a remote area. And I said, you know what, this remote thing isn't really for me. I'm more an urban person. So I decided to kind of come back to Montreal, look for a job, and I came across this technical writing position at Distech Control. So Distech at the time was a smaller company than it is now. I believe I was employee number 13. And so the role was to basically create user documentation and product documentation for all of their controllers. And, funny story, the person who hired me is still there. And he said something along the lines of, why should I hire you? You have a civil engineering background. You don't come from this business. I said, well, I'm pretty good with Google. My English is decent, and I can figure stuff out relatively quickly. So give me a shot. So he said, okay, fine, I'll give you a shot. So that was literally how it started. And I kid you not, I didn't know what the acronym HVAC meant. This is not this is a true story, basically. And so then what's interesting about technical writing is it forces you to understand, right? Because you have to, okay, well, this screen on this piece, on this plugin, well, what does it do and why, and so on and so forth. So you kind of get an under the hood look of how everything works.
Huge amount of appreciation for anyone that does technical writing.
Absolutely.
It is like, it is not something I feel like I could do. There's like you said, the attention to detail, and then at what point is this a caption versus a note and a warning, and like there's kind of these classifications and categories of information that has to be then applied in a consistent manner across all all of the different things that you're writing about, different sections or different hardware versus software versus firmware versus how to update, and it's a whole thing. And mad props to you, Omar. So how long were you doing technical writing?
Yeah, so I started doing technical writing, and being a small company at the time, you're asked to wear different hats, and so I started doing technical writing and then training of our system integrator partners at the time, and then also technical support. So as you progress and you learn more, you can do more, right? So you start taking calls from the field, and guys are calling and asking, or gals, and saying, hey, so how do I use this and how do I use that? Type of thing. So that was about a year and a half. And then from there, I progressed on to a sales role also at Distech. So I was covering Eastern North America and the Middle East. And that persisted for another 4 years about.
So you went from technical writing to being in sales.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And you're young at the time, right? Because you don't know any better. And so I remember the CEO at the time, he came to see me and he's like, hey, we have this role that's open for sales, Eastern US, Eastern Canada. What do you think? And you're young. Yeah, sure, I'll take it. I didn't really know what the implications of this were. I knew that I loved being with customers. That I knew already because of the training and technical support thing. But having a number and delivering the quarter and your funnel and all the wonderful things that salespeople do. That's a you earn a lot of respect for it once you actually do it, right? So it's a tough life, and but it's a rewarding one. And I think I was fortunate enough to be with the right product, the right time, the right team.
So to my ears, it just seems like a very rare story that someone who said, "Take a chance on me. I know how to use Google," uh, goes into technical writing, and then transitions into sales. Is that kind of a storyline you've seen play out multiple times throughout your career?
So for me personally,
Whether for you or for others?
exactly. I was about to say so yes and yes, both for me and for others. I mean, it's so valuable to keep in mind kind of the many paths that are available to us at every juncture, at every decision point in our life, right? You start with kind of one step, and that opens up three other options, and so on and so forth. So I've seen folks have similar journeys and paths that kind of wind their way through different industries, starting at one end and ending up in some place totally unforeseen. So if you had asked me when I was studying civil engineering, learning about building foundations, are you going to be optimizing buildings from the cloud with AI? I'd be like, what? What's AI? So it's not something that would be easily foreseen.
And then how long were you in sales?
So from 2004 roughly till 2008.
And then did you have a transition into something else at Distech, or because you were at Distech for a while, I believe? Yeah.
Yeah, I actually left in 2008. So I left and co-founded a lighting control company based in Montreal. So this was a company called Y-Wire Technologies. It was a venture-backed networked lighting control startup that manufactured lighting control systems for the retrofit application in commercial buildings. So I was the head of that company for a few years, and then worked under the VC appointed investor the VC appointed CEO for 2 years after that, I believe.
For something other than the lighting control startup?
No, in the same company. So continued there as VP of sales and business development afterwards. So was there for about 6 years in that venture.
So that seems like a bit of a jump. That's kind of an interesting career move. Again, going from sales from a building automation company to then helping found a lighting control company. What's kind of the story of how that came about?
Yeah, so this was also with a couple of other co-founders, and so the story there relates to stumbling across essentially technology that is used to deliver internet to rural areas. So it's called broadband over power lines. So they send the internet signal over medium and then low voltage power lines. So we said, well, if you can deliver internet kind of bandwidth and reliability type communications, why can't you turn the lights on and off? And so the idea was to build a gateway that would be connected to a breaker panel, and then simply replace the light switch with a networked light switch, or at the junction box you have a junction box mounted switching device, and the communication would occur over the existing power lines in the wall. So that was the kind of the spark moment, and then we kind of created a company, built a business plan, raised money, and kind of pursued that thereafter.
And was that the first time that you were ever involved with like a VC or an outside funding agent?
It was.
So that was probably a bit of a learning curve, right? Because I haven't been a part of that, but I hear that's kind of a whole different thing also to learn about.
It is. It's a phenomenal learning experience, because first you have to deal with the rejection, right? So you pitch. I probably pitched easily 30, 40 times before coming across a VC investor that actually understood what it is that we're trying to do and the market that we're trying to get into and why. So that teaches you a few things, right? First, patience. To how to refine your pitch and your game. Make sure that you're. So what am I missing? Why don't they understand? Am I missing something? These things are also very important, and you see kind of also what other companies are out there. So you participate in, startup shows and other types of conferences where you see what other companies are up to. So, anyways, it's a super interesting experience because of those aspects, and you learn also about kind of the investor executive kind of dynamic and the legal contracts that come with it, and so yeah, it was really fun.
Have those been skills that you've carried into BrainBox? Because I know you guys have had some good series of funding from multiple companies. Have you been a key part of those?
Yeah, so I've been fortunate enough to support. It's really our CEO that leads those efforts. So I'm just a kind of a role player that plays a certain role during that process to present, items related to our product and technology roadmap and so on. But yeah, of course it helps, right? You know how investors think, and you know what else they're hearing, and you know what shows they go to, what articles they read. So I think that's a helpful thing to have in mind, because you also you can sympathize with them, right? And you the dialogue that you end up having is one where they feel that you know how they think, and you know what questions they need to have answered as well.
Well, how would you counsel someone who was trying to take their prop tech initiative and find the right partner? Because there could be there's lots of articles kind of floating out there right now, particularly like this summer, around how valuations around startups, and particularly in the prop tech field, are kind of it's kind of going like this, and the whole industry is sort of going, or I'm sorry, the whole economy is just sort of going like this, and trying to figure out where the right place is to go. What do you say for someone that's trying to find someone to help fund their new initiative?
How much time you got? I mean, this is a big topic, but it's an important one. I would say first talk to people that have done it before, in everything that you do. So if you have somebody in your circle that has raised investment money, it doesn't have to be VC, by the way. There are friends and family investors. There's kind of debt. There are different vehicles that you can use to finance your company. So I would say talk to somebody that's worked with and or run an early stage technology company, ideally in prop tech. Talk to some of the VCs. They're really approachable, by the way. It's not that difficult to get a conversation going, and ask them, like, what are your criteria? What does your process look like? So these are tangible things that you can ask, and most VCs that I've come across will take the time to share a little bit of what they do and how they do it. Take a look at the investments that they've already made, right? So you can see those on their portfolio, on their websites. So talk to those companies, right? So approach them at trade shows maybe and say, hey, I saw that you raised a round with a so-and-so investor. How did you do that? How was that process? So those are all different techniques that can be used.
Well, that's great. I do feel like you just condensed an entire conversation down into about 6 or 7 sentences very well, because like each of those is like, oh, but tell me more about that. It's like I want to learn more about that. That's so it's fascinating. And again, like in this prop tech space of SaaS and technology and cloud and IT OT convergence or digital transformation, whatever you want to call it, there's so much opportunity. And I know you guys are seeing it, we're seeing it, and more and more conversations are happening. And I think kind of the pie of the opportunity and the people looking for these technology solutions to help them solve their problems is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So let's go back to, let's see here. After the lighting control startup, what was after that?
So I went to work for GE. So from very small to very large. GE at the time created a business unit called Current that was the smart building and lighting division. And they asked me to come on board and build a solution engineering team for all of their digital solutions. So that's what I did. I was there for about 4 years, and that was a very interesting part of the career, because I remember I had a couple of options kind of prior to joining, and I remember thinking, how do you run a company that has 300,000 employees? What does it actually look like on a day-to-day basis? What kind of processes, what kind of personalities, what kind of, you know what I mean? Like what's under the hood? So it was driven by a desire to understand that type of an environment. It was wonderful. I have to say it was a great experience. Lots of great people there. Still keep in touch with many of them. Some of them have joined BrainBox since as well. So I think that's also a plus. Yeah, really great experience.
When you look at the different size companies you worked for, because that's kind of another interesting nuance, small versus large. You said it was a really great experience, but do you have a preference? Small company versus large company? When I say large company, I mean GE is a massive company, but let's just say, we'll shrink it down. Let's say 100,000 employees.
A little bit smaller. I don't know that I have a preference. I think there are different things that you learn. There really are. When you're in a smaller company, you have to wear different hats, and you have to do a little bit of everything. Like we were just discussing, whether it's fundraising, legal, marketing, product development, engineering, quality. Many different hats to get the job done. The bigger companies obviously have a lot more resources, established place in the market, but a lot more specialization in the roles, right? So you're kind of playing a role on a much larger team, and so the benefits I would say in a bigger company is understanding how to build larger teams, understanding how to build processes that involve big teams and big volumes and so on. Also understanding the dynamics in the marketplace. So when you're at a company like GE, it's a lot easier to get a meeting, for example, than when you're at Wire Technologies, right? Nobody's heard of one, everybody's heard of the other. And so the influence of the brand, the influence of the relationships that exist in the market also matters in how you build your strategy. The relationships and contacts that you form when you're at a larger company are also very valuable things, right? So these are things that you keep with you and you can evolve and develop throughout your career.
Now we can go back, I think. Let's go back to tech writer Omar. Who were some of those first people that helped you learn, other than Google perhaps, what HVAC meant, what HVAC was?
Yeah, this is a great question. So let me be clear here. There is no way that I would have survived a day in this industry without the help of quite a few people, right? So many different people in many different roles. It's such an important thing, right? To realize that kind of this interplay, that being with one another as we evolve in our careers, kind of we take value, we give it back, and kind of we grow together. So some of the people that come to mind. So the person that hired me is Martin Villeneuve. He's now the CEO of the company. He spent a lot of time coaching me and teaching me, and just the basics. So I remember at one point I was I think writing something about the fan coil controller, and he's like, it's really not that complicated. It's a fan and a coil. So I things like this. He gave me the ASHRAE book, right? So to understand kind of how all the different units work and what their basic descriptions are and so on. So I can't thank him enough for his tutelage and mentorship. It was very, very formative. Many others at this tech, so in their development teams, obviously when you're a technical writer, you need to interface with the hardware, firmware, software engineers. Many folks on the sales side as well. So it's really a mixed crew. Lots of customers as well, actually. You learn from customers a whole lot. That's another big point.
So many of your relationships, yes.
Well, exactly, but I try to think back, and try to reverse the roles, right? If I'm a, I don't know, 40-something contractor in Chicago and I get a phone call from an Omar who's 24, I know he's 24. I can tell that he's kind of just starting out, right? But if and thank you again to all of the people that helped me. Is they were patient with me. They didn't point out my shortcomings. They maybe helped me fill some of the gaps that I have. Shared their knowledge openly. It's so valuable. You can't ask for a better school.
I can think of several customers that have been huge influences on me, and again, helping me understand things. And also, there's the whole boots on the ground mentality where, just because of my role and where I find myself, I'm not spending days and days on a site making sure that things are working with the pressure of the customer over my shoulder asking when's it going to get done. But I want to make sure that I can sympathize and understand with that. And I've had customers that have sat me down and been like, this is what it's like. Here's the feelings that you feel. Here's the technical things that you then have to work through, and every job is different. Two buildings that look the exact same, built the same year with the same systems, operate completely differently. And so it's just being able to understand that would only be possible, like you said, is with customers or those people around us. Now, when you make that jump from the tech right into the sales, is there anyone in particular that you feel like kind of helped you with that sales mentality? Certainly there was some elements of patience there as you learned it.
Yeah, so our CEO at the time, Etienne, at this tech was a very good teacher as well, and also quite patient. And again, with a younger version of myself, I made tons of mistakes and learned from them. I was fortunate enough to again have kind of the right product at the right time. So overall, the growth was there, but there were certainly lots of moments where you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, and you learn from it. I remember there was a project that I'd worked on very, very hard. It was a $1 million purchase order for the company. Really kind of put every ounce I had into it, and came kind of inches away from the finish line there. And I still remember the moment when we found out that we weren't going to win that project. And Etienne said, "No, it's okay. You gave it everything you had. We gave it the best shot, right? And it's okay. We move on. We go on to the next one. Don't kill yourself over it, right?" So it was also a good moment to remember that, yeah, you work hard. You're not always going to win, but if you have a good work ethic and you know what you're doing, you're going to win more of the time.
Yep. Sometimes when you lose an opportunity like that, it's good to be someone that owns a little bit of grass, so you could just like go out and mow it. Yeah, there was one time in particular I can remember losing something, and it was like 3 days in a row I mowed my grass, and on the third day my wife said, I think it's done. It's like, yeah, it is. Oh man. So if when you look at someone who, again, that 24-year-old that's coming into BrainBox, what are some of the characteristics that you would encourage them to grow or foster within themselves, either professionally or personally?
One, know that you're capable of almost anything. I know it sounds cheesy, but you can literally pick up the book, read it, learn it, and then apply it. So approaching kind of the problems and challenges that we face in our career and in our jobs as opportunities, I think is an interesting way of looking at things, and kind of the obstacle is the way, as they say. So once you learn how to overcome something, you've learned it, right? So now you can do it again in other contexts moving forward. So keep that in mind. Don't hesitate to ask for help is another one. There are tons of people that have done this before. Look for them and ask them for their help. Most people are happy to share what they know. Another interesting thing in our industry in particular is really being open to different technologies from other sectors. So there are many technologies that have been developed in other industries. Let's say the mobile phone industry or the banking industry or satellites, etc., that could be relevant to what we do. So looking at how other industries have solved problems and how could we leverage some of those technologies in our let's say built environment applications is also something I would strongly encourage.
So Omar, I have two personal questions for you. One is, you are very good at articulating these things. And you've articulated structure very well. You've articulated ways of going about a problem. And where did you learn to articulate and communicate so clearly?
Well, first, thank you for the compliment. I think, as you can see, I already have a large head. I don't need it to get any larger. But it's
Well, that wasn't my intention,
yeah,
but yeah, that's fine.
appreciate that. But in all seriousness, it comes from really kind of my background. So my parents, I have a engineer father and a English lit mother, to put it briefly. And so growing up, you have those two influences kind of available to you. And so, from a very young age, I had access to, a library of books at home. So I started reading at a very young age and became, I would say, a pretty voracious reader. I remember negotiating with my parents at the cash register of the bookstore, coming out, carrying a big stack of books, and they're like, "That's $400. We're not going to buy this, right?" So, anyway, so kind of negotiating which books to remove and return versus end up buying. But a lot of sci-fi, a lot of fantasy and fiction, and so on and so forth. So I think that plays a role in kind of how I communicate and tell stories.
Yeah, and you also just seem to do a good job of putting together the like the categories of how you're going to walk someone through something. I not only in this conversation but in other conversations we've had, I just feel like you've always had a very thoughtful and specific answer, which has tremendously helpful every conversation. The other thing I wanted to ask you was, you talked about that you love being with customers. You've brought up many times, talking to people and asking questions, and you wouldn't have gotten where you are if it wasn't for other people. Same thing. Where does your kind of attitude and mentality towards just loving being with people come from?
My parents, again, I think are a strong influence there. They gave me a lot of great things. Amongst them is the value of first having respect for other people, understanding the importance of listening to them, and understanding the value of learning from them. Also had some great friends, or still have some great friends that are quite good at building relationships and maintaining them over time, and kind of observing that is also one of the ways that you learn how to build these relationships and maintain them over time.
So, who are some of the people that you are pouring into these days, whether it be within BrainBox or extracurricularly in the industry? Are there any people in particular that you could think of that you're really trying to bring up and help learn these things?
Yeah, I don't know that I'm going to name names at this point, because it's it's a tough thing, right? Because we learn. No, I'm just being honest with you, because we learn. I have a hard time thinking of myself as just being a teacher, or I see myself as a peer, right? So I've learned some things. I've had a path that we just talked about. Happy to share that with others, and others have had their path, right? So for me, what's valuable is sitting down and sharing. Okay, these are the lessons that I've learned. These are the mistakes that I've made. These are for example, the books that I've read that have helped me on this topic or that. And so I do a lot of that, right? So where, for example, there was a period in my life where I struggled mightily, I would say, with let's call it interpersonal dynamics and organizational behavior broadly, right? So it took me quite a bit of time to wrap my head around it, because I was approaching things with a very kind of engineer mentality, which is, kind of, this is the input, that should be the output. I asked you to do this, how come it's not done, kind of thing, right? But you realize that people, and it doesn't work, right, as we know. So I spent quite a bit of time reading about let's say human psychology and science of motivation and other things like that. That I thought that was a very important kind of step change in my personal career. So that set of learnings, that set of books actually, is a list that I've shared with a few people in the industry, and they seem to think that it's also a helpful book. It's not a unique problem. It's quite a common one that a lot of people go through.
But that's a very intentional way of helping others kind of get a jump start on those issues that you had.
And you know, what's not obvious to younger Omar is that you can't succeed at everything because you're good at one thing. So I see this a lot, right? So somebody is a super good, I don't know, programmer or super good accountant. You know, pick a profession, right? And they believe that, as I used to, that, oh well, clearly I'm smart. Clearly I know what I'm doing. Therefore I shall succeed at everything else that I attempt to do. Not so I would say yes, but not without doing the homework. You need to do the homework in order to learn how these other fields work and what these other job requirements are. Yeah, so particularly that jump from being a technical kind of engineering focused person to having the people skills that are required in kind of larger organizations and larger teams, I think that's a big one.
Yep. I know that's something I've had to learn. And honestly, that little phrase you just used there is something I'm probably going to take home and talk to one of my sons about, who's now in soccer and, and trying to figure out interrelational dynamics of the other third graders. You know, it's such a fascinating thing. And, you know, I think it's, like you said, it spans so many. You talked about that being your younger self and what your younger self didn't know. It spans so many different ages and generations and maturity levels of recognizing with humility where we are and what we know, but then at the same time, as you said, know that you're capable of almost anything, and making sure that you just put in the time and the work and the effort to get to that expert level, to become a genius, if you will, a building genius, just like you, Omar. So if you had to give the listeners some recommendations on what are things that they need to be preparing for now, what are some of those things that they need to be investing in now so that 5 years from now they can be good at it, that they can be successful in it? I mean, I would think maybe a low-hanging fruit answer to that would be something like AI or data analytics at a minimum. But without putting any more words in your mouth, what would you say are those things that really need to be invested in and learned about now?
Yeah, I would say definitely the digital technologies broadly. You know, things like understanding how basic programming works. You know, like take a Python course, right? There are tons of free online resources that are really, really good, not that difficult to pursue. Code Academy comes to mind. But understanding how to code, not because you're going to become a software programmer, just to know what it looks like under the hood, right? Just to know what a programmer's life looks like and what terms they use. You know, we hear the word or the term API a lot. Well, what is an API? It's not that complicated, by the way. When you look under the hood, it's you know, just a set of instructions and so on. So understanding these key fundamental technologies of our age, so I would say programming languages, cloud architecture and technologies, artificial intelligence, data, like you said, data analytics broadly. And again, just having an understanding of what these realms are and what these jobs are like, I think is a super important first step. On the other side of the house, so non-technical skills, right? I think what we just talked about is very important. So understanding the basics of, you know, organizational behavior, human psychology, psychology of motivation, and then understanding also what kind of practical communication tools can one acquire to navigate some challenging situations. You know, you're in a situation and there's a challenging moment and your fight or flight instinct rises up. Well, what do? There are tools out there, and there are, again, people that have tried to solve some of these problems. So I would say look those books up, read them, practice those techniques, talk to people that have again solved some of these problems before. Usually people that have been you know, leaders of large teams or large companies, you'll find they've either intuitively or somehow acquired these skills as well. I think another maybe last point here would be just understand your own psychology and understand what it would take for you to be more resilient. Um, you know, the times that we live in are not always straightforward. You know, we have some economic challenges, we can have political challenges, etc. There are different things that happen in our life that we need to interact with and deal with. So understanding our own makeup and how we treat the information and then how we act on it, I think is a very important thing.
I would say also, particularly in a world where cultural norms seem to also be changing as quickly as technology norms. You know, how to navigate all of that. How do you is there now? I know book titles can sometimes get lost when put on the spot. Are there any books around organizational behavior that you would kind of immediately think of that you're like, this is the one that I'd probably recommend first?
There are tons of books that I think are valuable to read in that topic. It really depends on the angle that one wants to take. Like one book that comes to mind that is sort of in that vein is Good to Great. So it's a book that talks about or tries to understand what is the distinguishing set of features and elements that distinguishes good companies from great companies. And quite a well put together book with good academic research behind it. So I would say that's a good one to read. Team of Teams is another one. So Team of Teams is a great book to help us understand how just team dynamics and interaction between teams can lead to very good or very bad outcomes. And it really just talks about information flow and collaboration and workflow. So it's a really well, again, written book. Stanley McChrystal, McChrystal is the author there. So,
And then what about this idea of understanding your own psychology? Is there anything that's sort of opened you up to being able to better understand that?
I would say, yeah. So there are a couple of books that come to mind. I would say there's a book called Flow. So flow is a very interesting concept, and yeah, it's a very interesting. I would encourage a lot of people to read this book. So it talks about a state where you're doing something and you're in this state of flow, and it can't be too difficult. It can't be too easy. It's a state where time starts to morph and you kind of lose your perception of time. Some of the examples that people give are, let's say a maestro in an orchestra, right? Or a ballerina on her tiptoes. Kind of the world disappears and you're only in that moment doing what you do. So I would say try to find your flow. Try to find the things that make you kind of feel happy when you do your work and that give you that sense of purpose. And it's surprising what you find. It doesn't have to be some superstar amazing role in order for you to feel flow.
It was maybe a couple months ago. I had just traveled or I took a vacation or something. I came back to some 250 unread messages in my inbox and I was overwhelmed. And what I did was I turned on this classical for reading playlist and I just kind of worked on that. And 3 hours went by like that. And as soon as I was done and I took a breath and it was lunchtime, I was like, whoa, I think I just experienced flow. It was just one of those things where it was very clearly a different state of mind and a different rate of productivity that was palpable and tangible. I could feel it. And I immediately messaged, our leadership team. And I said, hey, I just experienced this. And I sent some information and articles over because then I had to read about it. It's not something that I experience very often, but when I do, it's amazing. And, but I think this book that you're referring to helps you get into that state more often. It just helps you understand, what are the triggers and the things that help you get into it. Because again, your productivity does absolutely skyrocket. I mean, in those 3 hours, I likely did 2 days worth of, typical work. But again, it wasn't the difficult work and it wasn't the easy work. It was just all the things of organizing and communicating and getting this set up and doing this meeting and getting that meeting set up. And Yeah, that's a fascinating. Anyways, oof, wow, I just went on a whole tangent about flow, but it is very interesting. Omar, so any parting words for our listeners, when it comes to just anything else in the industry right now that is kind of, it's like, keep your fingers on the pulse of this thing.
Yeah, I would say, like I said before, you kind of know that you're capable of a lot and a lot more, and don't hesitate to go and pursue that and follow that. Just take the first step and go ahead and do it. And the first step will kind of guide you to the next one, and so on and so forth. In terms of what our industry is maybe tasked with, I think, regarding climate change, buildings play a very, very central role. About 38% of all global GHG is related to buildings, and about half of that, about 20% of global GHG is due to building operations. So the energy being consumed in the buildings and so on. So in terms of reducing the CO2 emissions that are going into the atmosphere and helping with the whole climate change challenge, I think our industry has a very central role to play. And this is going to require us to learn more about energy efficiency. It's going to require us to learn more about emissions factors. It's going to require us to learn more about carbon technologies and accounting technologies. So this is going to come our way relatively quickly, is actually already coming our way. And our industry is uniquely positioned, I think, to leverage all the things that we know in order to solve what is a very meaningful societal challenge.
Well, Omar, thank you so much for taking the time today to have this conversation. I've always appreciated, every time we've talked, every time we've communicated or seen each other at those trade shows, just the humility that you show, the encouragement to me from the lifetime learner perspective, sharing that information, it just very much appreciated. You are absolutely a building genius, and I look forward to learning a whole lot more from you.
Thank you so much, Tim, for the kind words, and thank you for everybody who's listening for taking the time. I really hope it helps. Feel free to reach out to me if there's anything you think I can do to help, and or others, right? Again, like we were discussing. Thank you for the time, Tim, and I hope to see you in person soon.
Yes, very soon. Thanks, Omar. That wraps this episode of the Building Geniuses podcast, a production of KMC Controls. If you've enjoyed this conversation, we encourage you to subscribe and share. And if there's anyone that you wish or would like to see on our podcast, go ahead and tag them in the comments or reach out to us on social. We'll tag them in the comments and ping them. As always, we appreciate you listening. And until next time, learn something new, teach someone something, and build your inner genius.